Welcome, Impactful Parents. It's time for the Impactful Parenting Podcast, where I give you parenting tips and resources to make you a more impactful parent to your school-age child. I am your host, Kristina Campos. Welcome, Impactful Parents. Today we're going to talk about helping high school graduates and young adults who are struggling with life to become more confident, more responsible, and successful. Hello, my name is Kristina Campos. I'm founder of The Impactful Parent, and I help parents of school-aged children who want to be one step ahead of their kids to turn their chaos into connection with their adolescent. I'm a mom of four, a teacher that's taught every grade from preschool through high school, and today I help moms and dads like yourself navigate that exhausting, confusing, frustrating, but rewarding world of parenting. So welcome to The Impactful Parent. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Joanna Lily. Since 2006, Joanna has been consulting young adults over the age of 18 to find mental health, substance use, and wellness resources. Joanna dedicates herself to working solely with emerging adults who unravel in college and aren't thriving in adulthood. And in a time when many young people are struggling with mental health, substance abuse, self-esteem, and success, today, I'm happy to have Joanna on the Impactful Parent stage to give parents tips for supporting their child to success for their future. Thank you for being here today, Joanna.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with what unique factors during the transition to adulthood can contribute to young adults in this unraveling that you're speaking of? And how can they recognize when they need help?
Yeah, I think the biggest key in all of it truly is what they were able to do prior to leaving the home, right? Especially if we're using that example going off to college and unraveling while they're in their new, like, independent environment. If all of a sudden that's where they realize, oh my gosh, I don't know how to, insert any type of task that would fall under a young adult or an adulting skill. That's where I see that unraveling. And so I think it's a charge, right? Or an ask for the young adults to be aware. What do you know how to do? Right? This is kind of like targeted more towards high school seniors, because if you have the ability to still be home, right? And yes, we're doing all of the future planning while simultaneously wrapping up the end of this high school academic experience and focused on whatever else that, you're juggling. But we would be remiss if we're not focusing on a lot of those independent skills. And it could literally be as big as driving, having directional awareness, understanding geography, right? Like, what do you do if kind of scenarios? But also just as simple as, how do you handle conflict, right? Like, let's say you move into a residence hall and all of a sudden your roommate says something that rubs you wrong. How do you speak up? How do you handle how they respond, right? So it's all of these things that if you are not able to practice them while you're still at home and navigate it, it just feels like it's all too much, all too soon. And that's where I see the unraveling.
That completely makes sense to me. And I see it also with so many families. Now, of course, I'm going to ask you, what are some things that parents can do to help their high school student in this transition after high school? But I know there's a lot of parents who are trying. And so let's say, for example, you want to help your child prepare for conflict, whether with be their roommate or whatever they might have coming up. We're getting a lot of eye rolls here. We're getting a lot of, oh, mom and dad, they just don't know. Everything's going to be fine. And so there is some pushback there. So along with giving us some ideas of how we can help our kids, if you can couple that with, what do we do when we get pushback and the eye rolls and I just don't want to hear it, because our kids I feel like we're getting two different spectrums of kids nowadays. One that are very dependent upon their parents and are happy to stay that way. And the other who are very independent on their parents they want their independence and they just don't want their help there. Let me do it, mom. And so for both, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. to your point, two vastly different populations of young people. I think, honestly, it's not uncommon. First, if you're the parent that is trying to have this conversation where you're giving space to allow your child to kind of talk through some of these scenarios. How do you handle this, right? And if they're fiercely avoidant, we don't need to talk about this, or I'll handle it when I get there, then you can't force it now. Right. I think that's the biggest piece in all of this. That's one of those situations where I'm going to contradict myself right in this moment and say, you tried, right? So now it's just a matter of how you respond when they handle those situations out of the home. And it's not an opportunity to say, I told you so. Not that I think any parent would say that, but I feel like I do need to remind folks. And it's also not an opportunity to swoop in and help, like, what do I want to say? Not swoop in, but rather, you just ask the question of, do you want support right in this moment? Or do you want me to help with solutions? Because realistically, we could go right into that parent mode of, okay, how do you handle this? Let's do it. Let's role play, whatever the case may be. And it's like, look, they weren't open to the idea before. They may still not be open to the idea now, but they're in the thick of it, handling this conflict, maybe not handling it well from the parental perspective, but that's on them. So now we need to step back and just say, like, wow, that sounds really uncomfortable. What are you going to do? Right. So we're asking a lot of these open-ended questions to support our kid. But mind you, also just being kind of aware of how it is that they're going to show up, whether they're going to shut it down real quick or whether they're going to just be tender and vulnerable in this moment. And you kind of have that connection and they're figuring it out on their own.
Yeah, before you get to what parents can do, I want to stop and say thank you for that answer, because the asking your child what they need in that moment is really crucial. And I want to say that's not just for your emerging college kids. That's for all teenagers right now. They're so independent and they don't want our help unless they ask for it. And that's the mistake that so many parents make, is we're fixers. We want to fix the situation. And so what do? We go in there and we start fixing things. And they're like, whoa, never asked you to help me, even though they need it. And you're like, what are you doing, kid? Unless they ask, we kind of have to let them figure it out on their own, crash and burn if you have to, even though that hurts. But a lot of times they just need the venting. They need that listening ear. And when we go into that fix-it mode, it hurts the relationship that we're trying to have with our kid. And yes, just ask, do you want me just to hear this? Or do you want me to start proposing some solutions for you? Do you want me to help? How do you want me to handle this? And then you're going into that conversation. It's very supportive, actually. You're giving your kid what they need, what they want at that moment. And hopefully after they listen and vent, then they'll be ready to ask you for help. Yeah. So if they are ready to ask you for help, what do we do?
Well, I think that actually, as you were just talking, all I kept thinking about was, it's so important when we talk about solutions, right? It's not about the parent doing something for the child, especially in this emerging adult kind of time period. It's talking through, because you're much wiser, right? You've had lived experience, so you can suggest things like, if I were in your shoes, maybe these would be some ideas that I would explore. What do you think? And then the ball is in your child's court, because they have to navigate this. I know, again, we keep using this like roommate conflict kind of situation. I mean, I have it part of the unraveling, right? Sometimes with students that I've worked with, is parents have gone above to contact housing, like residence life. I need to make sure that my child gets moved. And it's like, hold on, this is a teachable moment for them to learn. If their roommate situation is that bad, what do they need to do? Who do they need to ask, right? I mean, this is like serious critical thinking and brainstorming skills that this teachable moment will last a lifetime if we give them the space to figure it out right in this moment. Who do you ask for help? What is it that they're giving you information wise for you to change what's in, kind of your life? And then what you do with that information then also informs your ability to self-advocate, to make change, to, again, navigate all of the adversity that life is going to throw at you, because let's be real, it's not seamless. It's not smooth. So how are you going to handle these moments that pop up that are challenging or complicated? We have to be a partner as a parent in supporting the kid think through. And so this is, again, we're focused on kind of like the 18-year-old college-ish student, but the reality is you can start to have these conversations with your child when they're in middle school, because let's be real, middle school is super hard too.
Absolutely, it is. And that actually brings me to a question. As you're talking, I'm thinking coping. Getting our kids to learn how to cope with some of these high stress just environments, situations. And a lot of times parents don't think, I need to teach my kid how to cope. What do you say for that? Because it's definitely helping your child transition, and it also helps them, navigate so many different things. But how do we teach our kids how to cope?
That's such a great question. I think we have to normalize that stress is actually healthy sometimes, right? Stress is something that motivates us. So having stress is okay, right? Let me just say it again. Having stress is okay. It's when it becomes a distressful situation or it manifests into anxiety or a panic attack. That's when we need the support of outpatient providers that can target some additional clinical coping skills. But for now, right? How do you handle stress? Let's go for a walk. Let's do some breathing exercises. Let's remove ourselves from the environment that we're in. Let's write down what's really going on so that I can step away and see, is this really as intense as I'm making it out to be? Because there's also a disconnect too of a perceived threat versus a real threat. And so again, we're just, this is what we're talking about is life is about coping. You have to figure out how to cope. It depends on the situation. We're also, what would probably be educational or a good thing to educate as a parent is what's a healthy coping skill versus what can manifest into an unhealthy coping skill. And that's where, kind of going back to some of the young adults that I work with who have leaned, especially in this day and age, I have a lot of young adults that are smoking weed because they think that is that's what's going to help me just quiet the noise and relax my body. And it's yeah, but weed nowadays is very different than it used to be. And if you've got a developing brain, it just ends up turning into a behavioral unhealthy coping skill. Let's avoid that. Let's look at going for a run. Let's go for a swim. Let's walk the dogs. Let's literally go in the other room and just lay on the floor and close our eyes. And, the list goes on. There's so many other ways that we can cope with whatever life throws at us. And it's better to be proactive and teach a lot of those skills now before it also becomes a coping skills are necessary right in this moment because our stress or our anxiety is through the roof.
And I think if we see our high school kid right now not coping well with their life, then we know that we need to step up as a parent and help in this area. And one of the things that you were saying was, let's go for a walk. Let's lie down. So my question with that is, when you say let's, are we doing it with our child because that's more effective? Or are we just making suggestions and seeing which one they take, and we're letting it do it? We're letting them do it on their own.
I love that you just called me out on my languaging, because I think what I'm referencing is, in order for a parent to teach healthy coping skills, we ourselves have to use healthy coping skills. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do all of these tasks with your child, though I do think it's helpful to demonstrate, hey, this is what I do when I'm struggling in this space, right? Or if before we even get to the place where we're having conversations of suggesting coping skills for our child, again, we need to role model ways in which we are taking care of ourselves as adults, and we're inviting our kids to join us in the moment. So honestly, sometimes it's almost like We're not telling you or teaching you a coping skill, but we're just inviting you to do this activity with me so that I'm in a like verbal and nonverbal way, I'm teaching you skills that you can apply on your own, whether you're at our house or whether you've moved on, whether it's in a college, residence hall or not. So I think it can be role modeled. I think it can also be an invitation of let me show you. And then we're just really we're trying out things too. That's the other thing. It can't just be hey, here's the short list of coping skills. These are your only options. Figure out what works for you. There's an endless list. If you Google coping skills for adolescents, you could get some pretty fun suggestions that show up there, like ice baths or cold showers, like yoga, all these things. Test it out. See what works for you.
What resources exist the summer between high school and college that's going to ensure this smooth transition onto campus?
Well, I will say that with humility, there's a lot on my website that parents can go to in terms of resources that are helpful, whether it's tasks that you're charging your child with, encouraging certain types of activities like working a job, what that looks like, as well as actually forms that you want to have signed before they go off to college. So again, thinking proactively rather than reactively. I think the other thing that exists out there is there's actually a lot of summer programs, whether it's, 7 days here, 2 weeks there, or even if it's college specific, tied to the university, like, hey, 2 weeks before the actual, start of the fall semester, we're doing a large cohort of first year students come in. We want to basically do like a slow rollout of what it's like to be a college student. And we're not tasking you with, being in the classroom, other than we might have specific activities that will teach you kind of from like literally from a physical standpoint, sitting in a classroom, hearing a professor speak. Everything is going to be more about social. It's going to be about getting you connected and feeling engaged with the campus, feeling comfortable with your new community, all before the actual start of the semester. So there's a lot of resources like that I think are really helpful, where it's basically we're teaching you college readiness, because really what's happened is you've demonstrated to us that you're college capable, right? You've got the SAT scores, you've been accepted to the university, you were able to get whatever GPA you got in high school. That's great. That's all focused on the academic side of things. When we're talking about college readiness, we're talking about everything else.
And what is the most common thing that you see as a consultant when working with young adults? Where do you see that happening, that downfall, the most common things that I say people come to you and say, okay, we're at a point where we need help?
Probably the biggest time of the year that ends up being kind of a flood for me is about 2 weeks into the 2 months, into the fall semester. So it is a student that came in guns a-blazing. I'm going to college. This is going to be awesome. And then just like totally did not realize that college is a full-time job, right? It's an optional full-time job. And if you miss the mark on treating it from day one, that I am here to work this job, think about it simply. Your employer, if you're not showing up for work, is going to fire you, right? Like that's an easy translatable like way of thinking about it. And so by mid-semester, students are now having this like, oh, shoot, I didn't realize that I was supposed to be turning in these weekly assignments. And they finally sit down to crunch the numbers and realize, even if I submit every assignment and if I ace it, I'm still going to fail the class. And it's not just one class, it's all of them. And so then it becomes this complete shame-filled spiral and imposter syndrome. What did I do? Where am I going to go? How did this happen? It's the end of the world. And it really becomes a college meltdown.
I could see that completely, especially with kids that go out of state and now they went away from their support system, and that just made the whole situation worse. Although it could happen to the kid who's just going to the community college even right down the street.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really can be for any kid. And that is so tough. I could just imagine right around October, it's just starting to, kick in.
Yeah.
Now, since you said this is probably the most common, and I'm going to agree with you, I see that too. What do you think are some signs that parents can look out for if they think their child might be heading down this path?
I think the biggest thing in all of this really is, are you noticing that your child is not going to class? Are they not talking about assignments? Are they not talking about like what it is that they're learning in their classes or things that they've been working on? If every conversation, or let me put a pin in that too and say, if your kid's not communicating at all, that's also a red flag to me. Like, you might be having way too much fun and you're not even updating your parents on what's going on with life. That means that we probably have an imbalance in what's going on. Like, your social life is probably like taking off and you're having a blast, but you're completely missing the mark and realizing that it's not just about joining groups or clubs or being a part of a sporting team. It's about, again, I'm here to be a full-time student. So I think that is often like in the social wellness bucket. That's probably the biggest sign. But I also want to make sure that I am not missing the mark. Going back to the conversation about like the two categories of young adults that we see, the one that's like super avoidant, mom and, like, parents, I got this. That tends to be the client that's like having a blast, living it up socially on campus. Now, the young person, the other group that we were talking about, the like highly dependent young person, where their social wellness looks like it's out of whack too, is we know that they're in their room, they're not leaving. If we do FaceTime with them, we're like, why are you still wearing the same clothes that I saw you wearing yesterday? It doesn't look like you've showered, or, hey, it doesn't look like you've slept. Pay attention to a lot of those signs. I mean, at the end of the day, it really is, again, academics have to be the priority. That's why we're a student. And I should also say too, we didn't even talk about people that didn't go off to college, but that's a whole other conversation in itself. For the ones that do go off to school, just pay attention to how they are getting connected. Are they making friends? Are they out and about? Or are they out and about too much?
Thank you for reiterating the two types of kids, because our parents are going to have both, sometimes even in the same family. And so it's really important that we are aware of those warning signs and aren't just in, yay, empty nesters land, because that's super exciting for us as a parent, that especially when we think that our kids got it, when they're telling us, we got it, or they're in their dorm room and they don't look like they're out partying. We still need to start being attentive to what is really happening. And I'm glad that you mentioned both groups. Just really, really important. Tell me more about what you do, because what is even a therapeutic consultant? The more we talk, the more I'm like, so many people are going to need you. They need to know exactly what this is.
I'm trained as a therapist, educated as a therapist, but I am not acting as a therapist. I just tell parents that I have the baseline knowledge of, if you come to me and say, here's what's going on with my child, whether or not they've ever seen a therapist or needed any type of mental health support, from a layman's terms perspective, I can start to think through what types of resources might be beneficial that help their child that they're describing. And so obviously that's more of like the educational side of things, but my job really is to connect with young adults, to build rapport, again, not as a therapist, but just like human to human. What's going on? What do you need? How can I help you? And as long as I have some sort of connection with the young adult, and they don't have to be excited, right? Because change is hard. And if all of a sudden too, a part of their introduction to me is, oh my gosh, I just dropped out of college. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? My job is to help kind of work with them to present options that provide a path forward that still feels like progress, rather than feeling like now all of a sudden your college interrupted. And like, now I'll never go back to school. It's like, actually, let's hit the reset. Let's get you the support that you need, and let's get you back on campus if that's where you want to be.
Can you describe one or some of the most effective approaches that you use for these kinds of interventions to support your clients in regaining that stability and wellness that they need, especially if they went down the wrong path of, let's say, coping badly? Like we talked about marijuana, we talked about there's other drug use, of course. I mean, the list goes on with bad coping mechanisms. So tell us more.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing too, and why students struggle more is because they think they're the only one, right? If you're looking at social media or you're looking at your small micro group of dorm, like the other people that are kind of in your residence hall or around you nearby, like that's how we're comparing ourselves. And if we think we're the only one that's struggling, which I can tell you every single person on that hall is struggling in some way, shape, or form, I need to normalize it. That's like the biggest piece, is like making sure as I'm establishing rapport with the young adult that they know that they're not alone. And then sometimes like bouncing out of that, like spiraling into shame of like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I just failed. I'm a failure, right? A lot of it's a reframe. No, you're not a failure. But yes, you did fail. Like, yes, you failed your classes. You did not fail your college experience. You weren't in the right mindset, right? So again, a lot of it's just like reframing the language, getting them connected to other people so they don't feel like they're alone, and then making sure that they're connected to the right types of therapeutic supports if that's what's necessary. And sometimes all you need is a mentor or a coach. And then other times it is like, hey, we are in a real big, like we have dug a very big pit. So we need to do like extensive therapy to get you to a place where you're able to just do coaching or mentoring.
And I asked that question because a lot of the kids that need help are going to resist the help. You know, again, going back to, I got this, but they don't. And how does a parent present this type of help to their kid in a way that's going to be received and not rejected?
I think choice is always important. So clarity on like a plan. So let's say hypothetically your child, it's mid-October, here we are. We need to withdraw from the university. Instead of just saying, come home and we'll sort it out, we got to be firm on the plan, which is, hey, it didn't work out for you, but we want to see you back on campus in January, right? Or set whatever timeline. If you don't want to say you got to be back at school in January, just say you got to get in a better position before we're willing to support you being back on a campus. People like me exist. I'm not the only one. So I think it's always helpful to say, I want you to interview one of, 2 or 3 people, see who you want to work with. So again, it's your choice, but we're going to support you working with one of these people. You have to work with someone to figure out what your plan is. And the reason why choice is tremendously important, because they're an adult. So especially if they're avoidant or resistant to any type of parental support in the past, again, choice is tremendously important. Pick who you want to be as your ally. And then because people like me are not family members, honestly, there's just the resistance almost dissipates. Because I'm this neutral party. I'm not the coach. I'm not the therapist. I'm literally just the person that's getting to know you to present options that actually feel like it's a fit for you. So that is really non-threatening, even for the most resistant young adult. But if there's a clear kind of, we'll call them bumpers, where the parents are saying, you have to work with this person and you have to figure out a plan. And that plan has to include, there's got to be some stipulations. If you're going to live back with us after school, you have to work with someone. We can be clear and firm in that process, but that's where it's not as stressful when you give choice.
And if people are listening to this and they are resonating with you and they want to start with you as their first option, or just even go onto this website that you talk about that has great resources for them, how do we get a hold of you?
My website is just lilyconsulting.com, and that's Lilley consulting.com.
Thank you for listening today. Remember to subscribe and share this podcast with a friend. And don't forget, the Impactful Parenting Podcast is an extension of the Impactful Parent community. Go to the Impactful Parent website and download the free Impactful Parent app so you don't miss a parenting tip that can help you and your family. Thanks for listening today. So go to theimpactfulparent.com and see you next episode.